Back in the glory days of the 1990s, when RPG developers were creating games for the Sony PlayStation, they essentially had one of three options in terms of approach. Would they embrace a more traditional feel with 2D sprites and 2D backgrounds like the Suikoden games and the Lunar games? Or would they choose to innovate graphically and go with a more polygonal 3D feel like Grandstream Saga or the battles in Wild Arms? Sometimes games embraced hybrids of both and did that successfully, like Xenogears and Final Fantasy VII. But Legend of Legaia is one game that did decide to innovate. They did go in a more 3D-oriented, futuristic direction at that time, but they didn't just do it graphically. They also did it in terms of combat innovations and the gameplay within combat. So in this video, I wanted to take a look back at Legend of Legaia and tell you what it's all about and what it represented at the time it came out. I'll talk about its merits, maybe some fair-minded critiques, and really just get to the bottom of the question, does it hold up now, and is it worth playing? But before we dive in, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and leave me a comment down below with your memories of Legend of Legaia. Legend of Legaia does adopt some novel concepts, as I said, but it also utilizes some traditional RPG elements, and I think that can be most easily seen in its story. Because in this one, you're in the world of Legaia, where humans coexist with creatures that are called Seru. These are special beings that can bond with individuals and grant them enhanced abilities. And basically, the story gets started with a catastrophic event. There's a mysterious mist that sweeps across the planet, and that first got unleashed 10 years ago, but it's now spreading across the land. And the mist actually drives the Seru creatures kind of insane, and they're turned into hostile monsters as a consequence. And those monsters attack humans and devastate the civilization, and that's basically the catastrophe that's enveloping the planet. And most of humanity is confined to isolated villages at this point because that's how they seek protection from the mist. And our protagonist Vaughn, he's no different. He's a young hunter from the village of Rim Elm, and when his village is threatened by the mist seriously, he discovers a rare artifact, and it's actually a benevolent Seru creature that's unaffected by the mist. And his name is Meta, and with Meta's guidance and power, he sets out to find the Genesis trees, which are ancient entities that are capable of negating the mist, essentially dispelling it. He's soon joined by Noah. She's a feral girl raised by another Seru named Terra with special powers, and they meet up with Gala. He's a disciplined monk that partnered with yet another Seru named Ozma. So together this trio aligns to kind of liberate the world from the mist and find out what is driving it. And one thing that struck me about this storyline approach is it really made me think that Seru could be compared to the Espers in Final Fantasy VI. I think that's a pretty good comparison. But really what sets Legend of Legaia apart from other RPGs that came out in this time frame is its combat, because the combat system is really its standout feature, because it blends traditional turn-based RPG mechanics with essentially a fighting game and tactical combo-driven twists that give you a distinctive feel and flavor and wasn't really offered by any other RPG. So, like I said, combat's turn-based, and the battles are initiated either randomly or through scripted encounters like bosses, and the core party consists of the three protagonists, Vaughn, Noah, and Gala, that are equipped with their own respective Ra Seru, and those are what grant them special abilities. But what sets the system apart from other games is the tactical arts mechanic. And this is where players input specific sequences of attacks to execute powerful moves rather than just, selecting attacks from menus like in many other games. So this has several key elements. First, the attack inputs. And this is where instead of choosing a single attack option, you actually assign a series of directional moves, high, low, left, right, and those are mapped to the PlayStation controllers. You use the controller buttons to select them. And each character has a limited arts point bar that determines how many inputs they can use per turn, starting small, but it does increase as you level up in this game. There are arts combos too, because you can change specific sequences of these directional inputs together, and this unleashes moves called arts, and these can range from powerful physical strikes to big combo attacks. Often there's like a cinematic flair at the end and some special kind of graphical acknowledgement of it being, a really cool attack. And discovering arts is one of the coolest things because it requires experimentation, and you can kind of do this through finding hints in game, but you really have to just play with it a lot to learn it. There's also a spirit state because characters can turn into kind of a spirit, and that boosts your art points capacity for the next turn, and it increases your defense, and sometimes it even heals a small amount of your hit points. This does add a layer of strategy. It balances your offense with preparation for bigger combos, and it's kind of a cool change of pace. But there's also a magic system too, and that's called the Raw Seru magic. So your companions, each of the 3 for each of the protagonists, they allow your characters to absorb magic from defeated enemies, and once the magic is learned, characters can cast elemental spells, and these are like fire, wind, healing magic, etc. These do cost magic points, like in many other RPGs. Each character's turn in combat is determined by their speed stat, and what's so cool is there's a randomization factor here too, and this was really interesting to me because occasionally after you've input your combo, it might trigger a hyper arts or miracle arts. This is a stronger version of standard moves, and it only happens if certain conditions are met. I think it's like based on your spirit or leveling, and it adds kind of an element of surprise when you unlock these, and it does a ton of damage, and it's really cool. And like I said, this system was probably the standout feature of Legend of Legaia. It's what makes it so special, because each character has kind of their own fighting style, and you can use this to your advantage while learning combos and techniques, and it's just a fun variety of mixing your combat with the magic and using spirit at the same time. The combat is really a pleasure in this game, much like, the combat in Legend of Dragoon is a very pleasurable experience as well. Unfortunately, I do think that the legacy of Legend of Legaia is negatively impacted by the style of visual presentation the developers decided to go with, because this game features a fully 3D rendered world, both in terms of the backgrounds and the characters. And at times, it can get by like this. You have scenes of the characters working through their dialogue, going through the story that don't seem too bad, but when the game really zooms in, you really see how big and blocky they are. And it just doesn't hold up as well as some of the other games that came out even around this time. And this was created by a much smaller developer, though it was published by Sony. But it came out about a month after Final Fantasy VIII. And Final Fantasy VIII used pre-rendered backgrounds and 3D sprites similar to Final Fantasy VII. That game has aged so much better. So this game really compromised in some ways by choosing to go to a fully 3D approach. And for a fantasy game like this, that was an appropriate choice at the time, but it didn't pay off in the long term as much as games that utilized other types of approaches. Now, to be sure, the game's developer Procyon did punch above its weight in several respects with this game. It was pretty ambitious because they weren't as big of a studio as some of the other RPG giants at that time, but I don't think they were successful in every way. And in another way that this is shown, I believe, is the soundtrack, because the soundtrack, while decently good at times, really suffers from monotony. It's more of an ambient soundtrack. It doesn't include a lot of catchy melodies, and some people might like it for that, but I don't really enjoy it as much. Also, the encounter rate is way too high. Even for a game of this era, in the PlayStation glory years, the encounter rate is just too ridiculously frustrating, and it really feels excessive, and that combined with grinding requirements kind of hinders the fun potential that you can get from this. The story is actually reasonably good, I think, and it plays with some interesting ideas. You do see some character development out of the characters later in the game for sure, and kind of explore some of their backgrounds, and that was great, but I do think there are pacing issues as well. But all that stuff, even in combination, doesn't detract from the game's true merit, and that is the gameplay. It's the combat system that I already remarked upon. This was a very unique system that was innovative, ambitious, and fun. It was great to be able to learn new arts, string together combos, and the game really did a good job in this regard. In fact, I think it's probably one of the most memorable combat systems from an RPG of this time, and that's to speak pretty highly of it. So is it worth playing today, and does Legend of Legaia hold up? Well, I think it basically does. I think this game is well worth playing, especially if you're an RPG fan of this era's RPGs especially, and you've already knocked out all the legendary games like Xenogears and the Final Fantasy games and Chrono Cross and the Suikoden games. This is a great game to go to next. It has a fun combination of character development and combat, and it's reasonably enjoyable. But I definitely want to hear from all of you guys in the comments, so is there any place or area you think I was too hard on Legend of Legaia for? Let me know. And do you think I spoke too glowingly of this game in some regard compared to your opinion? I want to hear from you on that too, so let me know down below, and until the next time, I'll catch you guys later.